that said the people have spoken through their petition. The people have spoken through their petition. What people? The people here wanted the mine. Ashland County, I don't know what the legal way it was, either way. But the people that spoke were the tribes that had people all over this state signing petitions, Potawatomi, walk into the bingo hall or into the casino here, sign this petition. People didn't even know what the hell they were signing. Them were the people that spoke for us up here. Again, Milwaukee speaks for Hurley. This has got to stop. No, they're so worried about water on the reservations and everything, right? Did you know anything about Odena? That 2/3 of the reservation has been on bottled water for over 15 years. And they're saying, oh, they're going to pollute our wells. They don't have any damn wells up there. Then, this came from a very reliable source. Concessions. They said that they will back yous off and keep yous backed off until their concessions are met. What the tribes get. Oh yes, it's all about concessions. And you start going.
I've been listening.
What concessions have you been making?
Excuse me. I've been listening very carefully to people, but when you get that far upstream, please justify your remark.
Justify it with who?
Where do you get some notion? Where's your evidence?
Where's my evidence?
Yes.
Eugene Big One. He was a tribal chairman up there for 15, 20 years. He's also my daughter's godfather. That's where I get it from. A very reliable source.
What? You made the accusation, sir. What is it we said and promised for what kind of concession?
It's going to be in a monetary amount. How much ore is taken out? I mean, it's going to be, concessions. You know the concessions that the Indians are going to get out of this. Oh, you do know it. Don't sit there and say nothing. Please. I've been up on a reservation probably for 25 years, and that's all I hear is we're going to hold them off until we get our concessions. And they're doing it. Now, the only people who should ever have anything to say about this mining are the people of Iron and Ashland County. Take the petitions from here. Milwaukee should have nothing to do with Iron County. We've been ruled by them people for so long, it's unbelievable. Well, everything else was covered. Leland covered a good spot where you're playing both sides of the fence. I mean, you got to cut it out. Take a stand. Don't run to Illinois. Stay here and fight for us. That's what you were elected for. What we wanted. But you're going by what Milwaukee County wants. You're not listening to these people. The petition said what you wanted. You said no. Goodbye.
Send an email.
Oh, I sent you my email.
And send a letter to the editor.
With the
documentation of this
recall. What
acquisition.
happened? You get recall. It seems like my whole crews get through, right? But I get through what I say.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Steve Sugar. I'm a displaced Hoosier. My home is in Montreal in beautiful Iron County. And from my kitchen window, I can look at the side of the stockpile where the grass is now greening up and the trees seem to be flourishing out there rather well. You only need, as we all here know, you only need an IQ of 3. And I told this to the Senate committee twice. You only need an IQ of 3 to know we do have some employment issues here. And hopefully we can find some resolution. As I look at the convolutions coming up and the stories coming up out of Madison from various people, and I must say, Bob Walashevitz and Leslie Colasar are a hard act to follow. But I listen to these stories, and I try to sort them out, Senator, representatives. I just shake my head. I'm concerned that the professional agitators in the more tropical parts of this wonderful state are having an influence that is undue on those of you who might be very well intended, very well meaning, but the regrettable political process in the state has skewed things in a fashion that do not bode well for this locality. I'd really like to put the iron back in Iron County, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Mr. Jauch, yeah, my name is Bill Barris, Montreal citizen, USA, right here. We've listened to what you've said, and it's just all political hogwash. You say you're for mining. The only mining that I can think that you are for is an imaginary world. You, excuse me, I'm not a very good speaker, I guess. All of your things that you've said about environment and so forth, towards the, excuse me, I'm choking up. In the environmental things that you're concerned about, in actuality, would only exist for an imaginary world, a perfect world. What you've done, or what you're proposing for, is that the only thing, or as little as wondering about an environmental issue, is reason enough to stop the permit. That's in a crutch what you're saying. Look in Wisconsin. You look to the east, you have prosperous iron mining, and they're going to get your sulfide permit over there as well. On the west of us, we have prosperous iron mining that's been going on for 100 years, just like GTAC is proposing here. Safe mining. What do we have in Wisconsin? Nothing. You're talking about a law back in the 70s that has stopped mining coal in its track for 50 years. Yes, it has. And what about Crandon? That's a sulfide project, yes, this buzzword, the sulfide, that's anyway, when it comes to iron mining, it's slightly different, and but what I'm trying to say is that the mining in Wisconsin has been stopped, and it's been stopped only for political purposes. For the last 70 or 50 years, it's been a political football back and forth. Republicans for, Democrats against a mining forever election that has come up. And that now this issue of mining here in Iron County, you don't have a leg to stand on. We know what you've done. We know who you are. You are not our senator anymore. What were you thinking? $1.5 billion investment in our lives, and you've thrown it away. Just what were you thinking? You supposedly have had, what, close to 30 years of good service for Northern County, and now you've thrown us under the political bus just for political power gain. I agree with Mr. Nacy. We have, what, 133 people in Wisconsin telling us what we have to do. You're regulating us out of business. You're actually infringing upon my right to self-determination. I'm sure in this listening session you were going to ask, what do you think about the voting bill that's been negated by 2 judges in Dane County? Because he feels it's unconstitutional because the legislative body is politicians for the politicians and not government of the people and for the people. So my comparison, this, what is your vote or what is your thinking on this voting issue? Are you for or against the voter ID law?
Well, why don't you finish, and then we're going to have opportunity to respond.
Okay, but in the same light, what I'm saying, this mining law is in infringing upon my very right to self-existence, my right to self-determination, and if a judge in Dane County can declare that law unconstitutional, certainly I think we should decide if the iron law is unconstitutional for the very same purpose. You know, I'm all worked up, and I'm fumbling for what I want to say and so forth. But the bottom line is, you and you alone are the reason that we're not going to have our right to self-determination with jobs here in Iron County fulfilled. You're the bottleneck. If this wasn't the recall season, by God, you would have been jumped on this and ended your political career with such allocates that you brought a 1.5 billion investment to our lives here in Iron County. And you just threw it away. So my question is, why? Why did you do it? You know, I want you to look at me. I want you to look at me in my eyes and tell me why.
I'll wait until you're done, sir.
Okay. You tell me why. Because you're not our senator anymore. You ask for respect, you don't deserve any respect. You go back to your history lessons, and determine who you are supposed to be as a representative of all of us who elected you. You are not representing us anymore. And I'll give you one possibility. Have you ever been determined to have onset dementia? Seriously, I'm but I'm serious. There's a lot of people that ask me just what could be the reason. Maybe he's getting old. So, and if you actually firmly believe in this environmental blah, 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 you are more dangerous than ever. Your only solution to this problem, our problem, is to recall yourself, resign.
I'm not going to go that far, but my name is Tanner Hiller. I'm a student at Mercer School. I believe I spoke to you last year.
Yeah, what is your first name? I'm sorry.
Tanner Hiller.
Yeah.
Senator, I did have respect for you. Not anymore. Senator Jauch, with one vote, you destroyed the possibility of thousands of family-sustaining jobs coming to the North Woods. Do you consider this responsible voting? Thank you. That's all.
Fill out a slip too, so I can communicate with you. There's one other slip here, Corey Carlisle.
Okay, I've never done this before, so I'm really nervous.
Speak your time. Glad to have you. Just say whatever's on your mind.
Okay, what I want to know is, if there is no mine, do you have a plan for jobs in this area?
Good question.
If you have a plan, and what would that plan be then?
Well, you're done.
I am done, I'm just,
I'm going to respond to everyone's questions as fast as we can.
okay, thank you.
We'll do that. Thank you all for being here. There are a number of topics, and I'll do my best to summarize a few. And I know Janet, Nick can offer some observations as well. Let me start at the last, where the statement is that you don't represent us. All of us elected you. 25th Senate District is either the largest or second largest district in the state. It runs from here over to Douglas County, down into Polk, Burnett County, Barron County. 157,000 people. And we, as responsible elected officials, have a tough job trying to balance the competing points of view of citizens who live in our districts. I have received a substantial amount of mail on this topic. And I don't use mail as a primary judge of how I will vote, but rather a means by understanding people's points of view. And for those of you who feel intense about my vote against the Assembly bill, should know that I have received substantially more mail from people who live in the district who are satisfied with that vote. Now, as I said earlier, it doesn't make any sense as public officials for us to simply tear people apart and try to make one side feel they're the victor and the other side the loser. The word compromise has been used rather often in this discussion. I have been working very hard to try to achieve compromise. I'm glad that Bob Bolshevitz testified. Bob Bolshevitz has been a great ambassador for this community. So is Leslie Kolazar. I've had many conversations with him, telephone conversations, emails. office visits. Our office was supported them when they came down. On the day that the vote took place, they were down there. Unfortunately, we did not have the chance to talk. I was not aware they were there. Had they been there, they would have known that I was meeting with the governor's chief of staff that day to try to figure a way to identify potential compromise. And we had agreed to meet the next day. Now, I've had conversations with him before and after. The point is, there were earnest conversations between my office, Senator Schultz's office, the governor's office, on trying to find that common ground on those 4 or 5 items that I mentioned to you earlier. Now, one of them is taxes. You might wonder where the idea came from in our proposal to create a $5 million upfront payment for 5 years, in which $3.5 million a year would go to local communities. It came from Bob Wilshevitz. It came from the Iron County Towns Association. At a meeting of the Iron and Ashland County Towns Association, they asked us to do everything we could do to try to increase the reimbursement to local units of government. And today, some of you are condemning us for doing our jobs to respond to the interests and wishes of those who came down. Now, we were in that proposal that Senator Schultz and I put forward. We could have kept the Minnesota tax in there, where Minnesota collects $18 million a year, and been pure, because that is what they were seeking, is a Minnesota-style taxation, where the majority of the money comes to local communities and the rest goes to economic development in the north. That was a proposal put forth by the Ashland County group. It's a responsible idea. And we ought to do our very best to make sure that if the company's making money out of this deal, that the taxpayers are not shortchanged. Now, the Assembly ended up with $1 million per year, and we were at $5 million per year. I came to Hurley before the vote, sat down with Dennis DeRosa and others, and at that meeting, we talked about a possibility of some compromise on that. I identified a couple of ways of using money rather than percentages. So if we had the opportunity to do it, to have that conversation, I think that would have been a relatively easy compromise to reach. Now, I don't know what the company would have wanted to do. But you have to ask yourself at some point, by the way, this is not a bill just for the Pinocchio Range. This would have been a bill that establishes mining policy for the state of Wisconsin. Which means Senator Schultz had a legitimate concern when this legislation would restrict the ability to protect natural resource areas. There are no special natural resource areas in the Pinocchio Range, so what was it doing in the bill? Other than it could affect some community somewhere else, maybe the Baraboo Hills, where mining is possible. And should not those citizens have a right to insist that when the state legislature is passing a bill, as some of you wanted to insist, that that bill protect their interests as well?
You never passed a bill. We got nothing.
Now the problem, I've not complained about the fact that I'm a member of the minority. But let's remember that the Republicans control the Assembly and the Senate. They've got the ability to do it. And I recall a year ago in July, when Janet and I came to Hurley to have a discussion, some of you may have been there who were frustrated that the Republican-controlled legislature didn't pass a bill last year. Even though people had been discouraged to believe that the bill could be dealt with in such a short period of time.
What's done is done. What are you going to do to fix it?
Now, let me get back to my proposal to the governor. I talked about it earlier. By the way, in this political world, you can get along with people in governing. I get along very well with the governor's staff. I get along well with the governor. We have talked about a number of issues that are important. when I did sign the petition to recall the governor, and I'll bet he campaigned against me in an election too. But we have a responsibility to govern. And when he and I sat down for 40 minutes, there wasn't an ounce of disagreement about the desire to ask outside individuals to try to see if they couldn't come up with a new consensus using pieces of the Assembly bill and the Senate bill. Because we realize in this incredibly intense political environment that I don't like any more than you do, none of us do, that maybe it's best that you have other individuals. Since that bill passed, I've met with Tim Sullivan twice. He's the chair of the Mining Association. Senator Schultz and I have met with him 2 times. We encouraged him to meet with George Meyer, a former secretary of the DNR, who has permitted mines and closed them. And by the way, there has been a mine opened and closed in Wisconsin in the last 50 years. There's been 2 mines. There's been the mine in Jackson County, and there was the copper mine in Rusk County that was opened, and that was permitted in a little less than 2.5 years, under the same law people condemn as being anti-mining. And that was a copper mine. So the process isn't as broken, but there is an effort, there is a way. We all agree it should be improved. I support streamlining, and I laid that out to the governor. I believe that he will, I don't know whether it'll be formal or informal, but I think he agrees with us that it is best to let Tim Sullivan and others who are outside the Capitol, who aren't involved in recall elections, who don't have their thumb on this issue, to begin to look at the areas in which we agree. Remember, there's 7 of them, substantial areas, and look at the other 5 and see if we can't reach an agreement in that area. I'm committed to doing that. Some people are going to criticize me because I'm continuing to find resolution to the issue. Some of these things take time because they're complicated. This is not easy. And when it becomes heavily politicized, it becomes more difficult. It took us 4 years to pass the Great Lakes Water Compact Bill to protect the Great Lakes from water diversions. And that was a darn important piece of legislation that's important for all of you who live in that Lake Superior watershed. And so, it's one other point I wanted to make, and that is trust the DNR. You know, if everybody trusted the DNR, then why do we need to change the law? The fact of the matter is that people want to change the law because they think that the DNR is too bureaucratic and takes too much time. So we looked at Minnesota, and Senator Schultz and my proposal is almost the same as Minnesota's in terms of timelines. And this, we've not heard me argue that this mine is going to do harm to the environment. Not once have I said that. What I've talked about is the changes in environmental policy that the company never asked for. Number 2, and that I don't believe are necessary, and not only me, but others. And number 2, I emphasized earlier the contested case. People's voice means something. Whether you have a job or don't have a job, what is incumbent upon all of us is to protect that basic fabric of our democratic society, that people have an opportunity to use that voice. And when government, for convenience, begins to cut off people specifically for one project, then we have failed those people. We have failed the citizen. And I don't honestly think most of you who have expressed your anger today have thought through that point. It's a very difficult concept that we all have to be sensitive to. We're obligated to think of others as well as just some. And that has been part of this. In terms of your question, what are we going to do to help jobs? When this company came into my office, the first thing I promised them was to do as much to help them as I did at Murphy Oil and Superior, which was talking about an expansion, major refinery expansion. It never took place because they could never get the contract. I immediately contacted the DNR and established a point person so they could have good communication. I contacted the tribe and the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife and encouraged them to maintain good and open communications with them. I maintained communication with Matt Fifield when he came to Madison. We had many conversations, and I tried my best to give them some good advice on how I thought they should proceed so they wouldn't feel disappointed or let down the community who had put so much hope in them. Now,